Ruben Swartz, your host and chief nerd. Welcome to Sales for Nerds, the podcast for people who love using their expertise to serve clients but maybe aren't quite so enthusiastic about the sales and marketing aspects of the business. I struggled with this for years, ironically, as a sales and marketing consultant to the Fortune 500. Over time, I realized that there was a more effective, more authentic way to get clients by helping instead of selling, teaching instead of marketing, and connecting instead of networking. My mission is to help you learn the easy way instead of the way I learned it, by sharing my stories, by bringing on awesome guests to share their stories. And of course, as a software guy, I had to go and create the CRM I wished I'd had when I was struggling with more traditional systems. It does more of what us solo consultants need, help us nail our positioning, help us get more leads and conversations off our website, get more referrals, have more conversations, automates proposals all the way through to e-signature and more, and less of the bloat that comes with traditional CRMs. If you want to check it out, you can start a free trial at mimiran.com. That's MIMIRAN.com. And you can even just sign up for the free version, which helps you nail your positioning. And you can also find proposal templates, lead magnet ideas, and more. Once again, that's MIMIRAN.com. Now let's get to it.
I'm here with Cynthia Zhai, a voice coach from powerfulexecutivevoice.com. She is a professional voice coach, a professional speaker, author of Influence Through Voice, and a TEDx speaker. She has helped professionals in dozens of countries on 6 continents use their voice to communicate more effectively. And I'm really excited to have her on Sales for Nerds, because most of us don't really pay that much attention to what's really going on with our voice. So Cynthia, welcome. What do you have in your glass?
Sure. Thank you for having me, Ruben. I am having red wine.
Can you be more specific, or is it just like house red?
Okay, this is house red. This is Jacob's Creek from Australia.
All right, very nice. And we should point out that Cynthia is in Singapore, and so we have a 14-hour time difference, and Cynthia has been very accommodating, and she is actually before noon at her time right now. So cheers to you for making this all work. It's probably past my bedtime here in Austin, but I've got some Averine Oregon Pinot Noir in my glass. Cheers.
Yes, cheers.
Now, Cynthia, I'm guessing, I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing you didn't grow up thinking, gosh, someday I'm going to be a voice coach teaching executives how to speak more effectively. How did you get to this point?
Sure, that's right. So I didn't think about, I wanted to become a voice coach. And but when I was young, I was thinking about becoming a teacher. Because when I was young, I think all I knew about professions were 2, either scientist or teacher. So I thought, I don't want to become a scientist. It sounds boring.
Now, all the kids going through school, they see teachers. How did you get exposed to scientists?
I think I probably read it in the books.
Okay.
You know.
So sorry. So you were thinking, I'm going to be a teacher.
That's right. So now in many ways, I am a teacher.
Right.
So, but even when I left schools, left my college, I was thinking that I wanted to work for a company. I never thought about becoming an entrepreneur. And it was in my last corporate job where I was doing training for our own employees. That's where I started to have this entrepreneurial thought that I wanted to do something on my own. And voice was something that came because there were participants in my workshops. I was teaching communication and leadership. So they were asking me, they said, oh, how do I develop my voice? Because I developed my own voice in my early career. And so they wanted to develop their voice. And I realized, not only when I developed my voice, it helped me, but also that now people want to develop their voice as well. So that's where it made me want to become a voice coach.
So when most people think about speaking, at least as far as I know, there's most of it is focused on just the words they use, like just a different script and maybe presence, not being scared, that kind of thing. But I haven't heard of anybody saying, let's focus on the actual voice. How did you go from sort of the generic leadership training, communication training to you got to really hone in on the instrument that you're using?
That's right. So that was mainly because that I developed my own speaking voice. So in my very first job out of college, that I was not assertive. I was not being heard. And that led me onto the journey to look for different ways to be more assertive. And I stumbled upon speaking voice. I had training in singing, but singing voice and speaking voice, there are still differences. So when I learned about speaking voice and worked on my own speaking voice, which is the voice mechanism, I realized, wow, this is not only I sounded more confident, more assertive, but also I felt more assertive, more confident. So that's where I realized the voice can be changed. And also it has power. And for my early starting the business, many people were doubting, oh, will this work? Even my mentor doubted this is probably not going to work. But I believed strongly it would work because it worked on me. And that's where the focus came.
So let's think about this, because I think a lot of people are in a situation, whether they're entrepreneur or they're in a corporate world, and they think, I'm not asserting myself effectively. How did you stumble upon voice training, and what did you learn that maybe you needed to change, and that maybe other people listening to this will realize they need to change as well?
So for example, when I was not assertive, one is that my voice will not be very strong enough. It's like right now I am demonstrating. Then when your voice is not strong enough, even if you want to express something, people won't be able to hear. So a lot of my clients said, I said something, no one heard it.
Because they were literally just being quiet.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So that's one problem, which is the voice was soft. And two is that even when I was expressing myself, I didn't sound certain, sure enough. For example, I might be saying, this is what I think. Or this is what I think. So it's either the energy was dropping at the end of the sentence, or that I was sounding like a question.
So let's say those again for people listening. Let's do the one that's not assertive first.
Sure. So the first one was, this is my opinion.
Okay, and then what did it change to after you did the voice stuff?
Change that, because that one, the voice is fading off at the end. So to change it is, this is my opinion. So make sure that the volume, the energy is consistent throughout the sentence.
Okay. Now, that all makes sense. And I've been in meetings where I've seen people get ignored or not taken seriously because they're shy. They have they're not assertive physically with their voice and their posture and sort of just the way they present themselves. And then there are people like me who just kind of talk and don't, maybe should shut up a little bit. And I think some of it is gendered, right? Men are more likely to talk more and women are more likely to talk less and be less assertive, at least in some of these corporate settings. What else should people be paying attention to beyond just making sure that I've got the right volume and even volume?
Okay. The other thing, of course, is the mindset. So this applies to both men and women. So in my clients, both men and women, they will have the mindset, the fear of being judged. So they might be saying, oh, what if I say something that sounds stupid?
Mm-hmm.
Or what if I say something that's not perfect? So they have all kinds of these concerns, the fear that they will be judged. So that's why that when they're speaking, it is reflecting in the voice. They are not sounding sure, certain, or assertive.
Now, in some ways, isn't this ironic? Because as human beings, we are programmed by evolution to judge people based on the sound of their voice, right? And so if somebody is sounding like they're not really sure or not really confident, we assume that they're not really sure or not very confident, and we don't get confidence from them, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So you see, this is the vicious cycle that when you have the mindset, it will affect your voice. And when your voice is soft, when your voice is not assertive, it again affects how you feel. Oh, now it is true that no one is listening to me.
And then you feel lack of confidence, you talk softer, and it goes and goes and goes. And at the same time, you sort of have sometimes the opposite problem, which is, I think, in American corporate circles more stereotypically male, where the male is super confident, super assertive, even if they don't know what the heck they're talking about, but they sound so confident and assertive that people believe them and think they must know what they're talking about. And that cycle perpetuates itself as well. So is it possible for the pendulum to swing too far the other way, like to get too confident and to be too polished and not have the right balance, if you will?
That's right. So in my early years of my business, there were a lot of clients who were speaking with a soft voice or inassertive voice. But as my business grows, there are also clients whose voice was too assertive or rather aggressive. So they came to me because people kept on telling them, you sound too aggressive, you're too loud. So then that's where that we will find the balance.
So along with, I think everyone hopefully can sort of understand that our voice communicates about ourselves, sort of our level of confidence in what we're saying, and our volume communicates something about that as well. But what else beyond that should we be thinking about? Because I'm guessing there's a lot more to it than just have the right level of confidence and the right volume.
Yes. So it also include, for example, the way you use your breath. So breath is an indication of how you're feeling about yourself as well, mentally, emotionally, physically. So for example, when you're nervous or when you're agitated, it does show up in the voice, in the breath. So then we need to pay attention to how we're using the breath. For people who are aggressive, they will notice that the breath is fast, is a lot. And then after a while, they will feel breathless.
And does that come out in the voice itself? Can I hear this just over the phone?
Yes,
Okay.
definitely. So you will hear in the phone because the breath, one is you can hear the breath. Two is you will also hear the voice.
Okay. So we've got to modulate our volume, modulate our breathing, which I think is one of those underrated things, right? We breathe constantly and rarely think about it, but it makes a huge difference to breathe at the right tempo and the right depth from the right place and so on. What else should we be thinking about when it comes to our voice?
The other thing is that you will also need to pay attention to where you're projecting your voice from. So for example, that because of the stress, because of the tension that we're experiencing in the modern society, that a lot of people's voice will end up in the head, from the throat all the way up. And then you hear the voice is sounding a little bit high pitched, is a little bit thin, and it sounds very tense. And it doesn't draw people in. So instead, we want to have the voice coming from the body. So when the voice is coming from the body, it's more relaxed. And also it puts people in a more receptive mood. So for that reason, a lot of my clients, they said, I want to sound like Morgan Freeman.
We all want to sound like Morgan Freeman.
Because his voice is from the body. It's very relaxed.
All right. So now we've got a really interesting segue here. What should we all do to sound more like Morgan Freeman, other than make sure that we're relaxed and we're speaking from our core instead of our throat up?
Yes. So of course that not everyone can become Morgan Freeman because there's only one. But we can have the quality of his voice, which is that the voice coming from the body. So what do we need to do? First, we need to breathe properly. So we need to learn the proper breathing. That's the breathing we're talking about. Proper breathing is when you breathe in, you see tummy comes out. When you breathe out, the tummy goes in. So that's the proper breathing, and they need to become a habit. So once proper breathing becomes a habit, then we will need to work on how you are going to generate more sound in the body. Sound is vibration. So you will need to generate more vibration in the body. So that's the next step.
So just to emphasize, I think this is really important, and correct me if I've got this wrong, but we really want to make sure that we're breathing by our belly going in and out, not our belly staying in the same place and our chest trying to breathe in and out, right? Because that's where we really get that shortness of breath.
Yes, that's right. Because for most people, when they're breathing, it's the chest, the shoulder moving up and down.
It's funny. I remember I was in college a gazillion years ago, and I was on the phone with somebody who was trying to offer me a job, and then the call waiting came in, and a different company trying to offer me a job was calling in at the same time. And I was trying to talk to these people and I was nervous. And I remember realizing what was happening with my breath. It was all coming from my chest. That didn't let me, that nervousness led to the breathing being wrong, led to me being flustered and confused. And it was, somewhat stressful situation. But once I realized what was happening and then I could focus back on my breath, then my whole body could calm down and my brain could calm down and I could actually have a conversation. This is decades ago. And I still remember that sensation and those two conversations overlapping. So yes. I think if you're in that situation, it doesn't mean that you have to panic. Just recognize that it's happening and go back to breathing through the belly and talking through the whole torso, right?
Yes. And the key is that to make everything a habit. For example, for proper breathing, make it a habit. So when it becomes a habit, and also when it speaking with the body becomes a habit, even if you're nervous, your voice will never change. Your voice will never tremble, go fast pace or high pitch. So there are still times I'm nervous. I could even feel my heart was pounding. But whenever I spoke, that people didn't hear any nervousness. Instead, they said, Cynthia, you sounded very calm. I said, you didn't know. My heart was pounding very fast.
And there's also sort of that notion of, I understand this is happening, but it's more like excitement than panic. Yes. When you have that practice. So let's talk about practicing breathing. What should people be doing?
Okay. So one exercise I ask them to do is what I call Kungfu breathing. Because the body has been breathing in the wrong way for so many years. We have to do some conscious, deliberate exercise to correct it. So what people can do is, for Kung Fu breathing, is we need to push the stomach in on purpose. So when we are pushing the stomach in, the air will come out, which is breathing out. So I recommend them to let the air come through the mouth. And then once you push the stomach in to breathe out, the inhalation should be automatic. And then you will see the stomach comes out very naturally. So I'm not sure, because probably they wouldn't be able to see the video, but I will demonstrate on the video anyway. So what we do is we put one hand on the upper stomach area, and then what we're going to do is push the stomach in. So you may hear my air sound, which is, so that's breathing out. And then the inhalation, it should be automatic. You will see the stomach comes out. So they'll be repeating this process to correct the diaphragm, the way the body has been working.
All right. And if you're listening to this on audio, we'll put a clip of this video on the show notes pages so that you can see this in practice. Of course, I'm sitting here trying to do the same thing, not quite as professionally as Cynthia. Now, how many breaths should we take? How many seconds should it take? How many breaths per minute? How do we think about sort of the pace of breathing?
Okay. So I recommend people not to think about that.
Okay. This is why you're here.
Because when we are speaking, we want to focus on the message. So some of my clients, they went back, they say, oh, I try to focus on my breathing, but it's all messed up. So we want to focus on the message. What we want to do is when we are focusing on the message, we can use more breath on some key words. For example, if we say, the best voice comes from the most relaxed body. So I'm putting more breath on the word best and most. The message is clearer. If I just say the best voice comes from the most relaxed body, people don't remember anything. But if I say the best voice comes from the most relaxed body. So when I use more breath on these two words, after I use the breath on these two words, my body will take automatic inhalation to refill my air so I can continue to finish the entire sentence.
So that's a great point. So we don't want to be perfectly flat. We don't want to like fall off in volume and sound shy, but we do maybe want to emphasize certain words or phrases.
Yes, yes. We emphasize by using more breath. The problem is sometimes people will either go high pitch or go loud on those words. Then you'll startle people like the best voice comes from the most relaxed body.
Now, something else that someone has mentioned earlier on this podcast, but I think it's really important. And I'm such a fan and a convert to live conversations versus electronic conversations asynchronous conversations. Human beings evolve for actual conversations. And even us introverts have to or should enjoy having conversations in the right way. And one of the things that really stands out to me is that according to studies, I don't know how they measure this stuff, but most of the communication is not the words. It's the stuff that surrounds the words. It's the tone of voice, it's the body language, all the other things. And when you're talking about voice, I think you're talking about obviously the tone of the voice, but as you're pointing out, even if we're on the phone, the body language is going to come through in the voice, right?
Yes, for sure.
Like our posture, our breathing, how we're feeling about ourselves and how we're feeling about what we're saying.
Yes.
Very different than an email or a text or a social media post or whatever, where a computer could read the same words and have a totally different sense of meaning for the listener.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's right. So even people couldn't see you, they can, in a way, they can hear, they can sense the body language, they can sense anything that's happening.
Now, one of the things that we started off talking about, which I think is really important, is this notion of assertiveness and confidence and getting your point across, being heard, being taken seriously in a room full of people or a Zoom call or whatever it is. But at the same time, a lot of communication involves situations where we're not sure, right? We're trying to figure something out. How do we express that in a way that's productive?
Yes. So first of all, if it's something that you really are not sure, then you want to be frank, be honest about it. You can say that, this one is something that I have not thought about. And let me do some work and I'll get back to you.
Oscar Trimboli came on the podcast a while back. He was actually from Australia, which I think is probably the furthest anyone's been from Austin on Sales for Nerds. And he had a wonderful show about deep listening. If you haven't listened to that episode, listen to it. It's fantastic. But I wonder if you have anything that you'd like to say about how we should think about listening to people when they're speaking.
Yes. So we want to listen to the voice because the voice tells a lot about what's happening. So for that reason, sometimes people don't want to talk to me anymore because they said, you can hear everything.
Now, what are they saying that they don't want you to hear?
I think probably because they are still having things that they don't feel comfortable to share. There are probably areas they still need to work through themselves.
So when we're listening, what should we be attuned to that's going to help us understand better what the person's really saying?
Sure. So one is you can hear whether the person is tense or relaxed. So if the person is relaxed, you hear that the voice is coming out. And the problem for a lot of my clients is that when they're speaking, this is how they sound. And this is not relaxed. And it sounds like either you get the impression that they're nervous, they are closed, or they are hiding something. So it's because that what created this problem is that they're holding the breath while they're speaking. And then after a while, they run out of breath. So that's one thing you can hear, whether the breath is coming out or they're holding the breath. When they are holding the breath, it sounds tense, not relaxed.
That's a great point. I think, at least for me, and I'm guessing for many listeners of this podcast, I would experience that when I was in a sales situation that I wasn't comfortable in. And I was trying to impersonate a salesperson, and I would end up with that, like, oh my gosh, now I'm out of oxygen and I'm all tense and it sounds terrible and it sounds inauthentic. Even though deep inside me, I really wanted to do the right thing and help people, it didn't sound that way. And I had to learn to let go of all of that and just be myself so that I could, to your point, I didn't think of it this way. This is really helpful for me, even years later, to kind of diagnosing where I was. Then I could just be relaxed and be myself, which one was much more pleasant for me, but it was also so much more effective because, as you say, it's very hard to tell the difference between someone who's nervous for whatever reason and someone who's nervous because they're hiding something or not being honest with you. And I knew I was coming across as someone less than completely honest. And it was just because I was freaking out. It wasn't because I was trying to do anything wrong. But then you create, as you said at the beginning, this vicious cycle, right? Where you sound nervous, people are a little bit put off by you, you get more nervous and so on. So it's a great point about we can listen to. Now, if we're listening to somebody, because going back to what you said originally, you were worried about not being assertive and sort of sounding nervous in some of these situations. You weren't hiding things. You weren't being dishonest. You were just nervous. And I think on one hand, we obviously want to screen out people who are being dishonest, but at the same time, maybe we want to give a chance to people who haven't received your coaching yet and just sound nervous. How can we tell the difference between the nervousness and the dishonesty?
So one is that you're seeing that the breath, you're hearing that the breath is being held. The other one is if you're seeing this person in person, if you're having a conversation in person, then you will also see that their body language. So the body language between someone who is nervous and someone who is not assertive or confident, or someone who is hiding something will be different.
Can you give us some specifics?
Sure. So, for example, the eyes. When someone who is not honest, you will see that the eyes are going to be probably looking left and right instead of being grounded or looking the person into the eyes. Well, for someone who is nervous, they didn't even pay attention to their eyes. It's just that all over the place.
Okay. Can we just ask people? Can we ask sort of clarifying questions that will help us figure out which camp somebody's in?
Yes. You can ask further questions. Like, for example, still the pandemic example, we say that, oh, if he says that, I predict that this is going to be over in 6 months. And then you can ask, you say, what are the research results that you can show us? What is the data? When would you release the data?
So basically, you just ask for more information. You can see if they have the information, they're just having trouble getting it out, or if they're making stuff up.
Yes.
Okay, that's fantastic. So let me try to recap as best I can. We communicate a ton of stuff, not just by the words we use, but by the tone of our voice, which comes from our whole body, really. Comes from our breath, comes from where the voice is coming from. We want to make sure that we're not sort of trailing off into shyness. At the same time, we don't want to speak in a flat monotone like a computer. And we want to be aware of this when we're speaking and also when we're listening, right? Did I miss anything critical that people should walk away with?
Yes. So one, we mentioned that they can practice the breathing. The Kungfu breathing. The other one I kept on mentioning, which is the best voice comes from the most relaxed body. So one thing people can do if they get on the sales call is just to make a sigh. It can also, even better, they can sigh with a sound. For example, they take a breath in and then they do. So when they're sighing with a sound, one is sighing helps you release the tension that's been held in the body. Two, yes. Two,
so
is
we're
that
sighing our way into our Morgan Freeman voice. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Because when you're sighing with a sound, you notice that the sound is kind of going down in the body, not in the throat anymore.
Right. Okay. Very good. So this is fantastic. And I hope that people listening to this are going to spend a little bit of time thinking about how they sound and how to sound. I wouldn't even say better, just more like themselves instead of themselves with a mask of nervousness in front of them. And if people want to get more information from you, Cynthia, where can they find you?
Sure. So first is that they can go to my YouTube channel. So my YouTube, there are over 250 videos.
And we'll have a link to that in the show notes because the YouTube channel URLs are terrible, right?
Yes. So one of them, one of the latest videos, I was demonstrating the breathing, the improper and proper one. So they can find it.
Great.
We have 43,000 subscribers. So our listeners are welcome to become the next one. That's one. And then, of course, the second one is my website. So my website, there are also a lot of resources that can help them develop more convincing and powerful voice. So that's powerfulexecutivevoice.com. And the final place is is my social media. So they can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram.
Wonderful. We'll have all those links on there. Cynthia, cheers to you. Thank you so much. This has been super helpful. I wish I had run into you let's just say more than a decade ago, and leave it at that. It would have been so useful to me. Cheers.
We should make some cheers up.
Very nice.
Thanks for listening. Did something in this episode or a past episode help you out? I'd love to hear about it. Send comments, questions, or ideas for future episodes to hello@salesfornerds.io. And of course, iTunes reviews are super helpful for getting the word out. So if you've got a few moments to put one of those up, I'd really appreciate it. If you've got a friend who'd benefit from one of these episodes, send a link. If you've got a friend who wouldn't benefit from one of the episodes, but you just haven't talked to in a while, this is a great excuse to pick up the phone and give them a call. Of course, if you're looking for a whole new take on CRM for solo consultants, along with proposal templates, lead magnet ideas, free positioning tools, and more, check it out at mimiran.com. That's MIMIRAN.com. Again, thanks for listening, and until next time.